I speak tonight on the Public Health and Wellbeing Amendment Pandemic Management Bill 2021 with a heavy heart and indeed genuine apprehension and fear with what these extraordinary laws will do to the society and indeed the people of Victoria, who have endured so much for such a long time because of the incompetence of those opposite us.
The legislation that's before us today, those new laws, will provide some very clear and streamlined framework for managing pandemics into the future and making sure that we continue to keep Victorians safe.
I happen to agree that it should be politicians that make the calls on these things. But they've got to be subject to the House. They've got to be subject to normal parliamentary scrutiny. This bill gives none of that.
We have consulted leaders in the public health, human rights, law and policy making, as well as culturally and linguistically diverse community groups and the public housing and social service sector to ensure this legislation will meet Victoria's needs well into the future.
This bill will allow detention without cause. This bill will allow arbitrary arrest. This bill will allow discrimination of people based on race, sexuality, sex, gender, disability, religion, political beliefs. That's what this bill allows. And if the Health Minister and the Premier don't want to use the bill for those things, then put clauses in that narrow it. Because at the moment, that's what the bill allows.
This bill before the House offers more transparency and has a greater range of transparency and accountability measures than any other jurisdiction in Australia, including New South Wales.
I give an absolute guarantee when we come back to government in this state, we will repeal this law because it is fundamentally right to do so.
The powers themselves that are in this bill are not substantially different to the powers that exist right now. The change is that they're being signed off by the Premier and the Minister rather than a public servant. So all of this hyperbole, all of this hysteria, it's not because the powers themselves are so fundamentally different, it's because the person signing those powers are the very people that the Leader of the Opposition said ought to be the people signing off on those powers and on those directions.
This legislation puts no safeguards in there for the Parliament. What the Opposition has very, very clearly said, for the benefit of the Minister at the table, is yes, there does need to be powers in a pandemic, in a health emergency, but after a period of time, they should come back to the Parliament.
This bill will not introduce lockdowns. We're not going into lockdown following the passage of this bill, but what we will do is rely on the learnings of the last 2 years. We'll put in place a better and fairer, more fit-for-purpose framework to help us navigate any future outbreaks or any future pandemics.
I cannot believe that this Premier would resort to the level of low that he is doing by trying to rush through a 112-page legislative change that we've never seen in this Parliament before, introduced yesterday, and trying to ram it through, censor debate today, to not even allow elected representatives in this chamber to speak on behalf of their constituents that have had enough, that want government out of their lives once and for all.
This is essentially the New South Wales model. We've looked at New Zealand, other best practices, and this is a model in this bill that has more accountability and more transparency than that model.
I doubt whether anyone in this House has had the time to read this bill, given that it only became publicly available yesterday. Everyone in this House needs the opportunity to have time to come to understand as such an important piece of legislation such as this, and we haven't.
So under this new legislation, the Minister of Health will also be required to publish an explanation of any charter rights that are or may be limited by a pandemic order. And the public health advice and pandemic orders will also be tabled in Parliament, and a new independent advisory committee will be established to review the public health orders and report to Parliament. The committee will be made up of experts and community representatives to advise on the government's pandemic response and management powers.
It offers no rights of appeal to courts for people who are incarcerated. It sets up a penalty regime of fines that would see an individual face more than $90,000. That would send most ordinary Victorians to jail. Who can afford a $90,000 fine?
This bill, in fact, reminds us that we do have in the state of Victoria a Charter of Human Rights that all forms of executive government action are the subject to, and indeed have been the subject of appeals to the courts in the current pandemic. That right remains.
The way that this bill has been introduced raises enormous concerns. It's suspicious, it's sneaky, it's sly, it's underhanded, and it is wrong.
So this bill is something that we would not have anticipated, nor would anyone have anticipated was needed. But it is a bill that is the bill for our time.
Sometimes bad people get elected to parliaments. Sometimes weak people get elected to parliaments. Sometimes circumstances turn people who are otherwise good. They turn good people with power into people who make bad and wrong decisions. And whether you think that the current Andrews Labor government is made up of good people or bad people, or strong people or weak people, the point of this bill is that the extraordinary powers it gives will be available to every future government.
Under this framework, elected officials will be the accountable decision makers, but the Chief Health Officer remains central to all key decisions. Their independent and impartial advice as a Chief Health Officer.
It gives the government similar powers as the currently operating state of emergency powers, but without requiring monthly parliamentary approval. And this will allow things like quarantine to continue next year. And the legislation could also be activated in the future for some other pandemic threat. The powers come with added oversight. An independent expert committee will publicly criticise unnecessary or excessive health orders. There's more transparency. The Chief Health Officer's advice will now also be public. And this makes it harder for any government to be heavy-handed or to depart from expert health advice without a compelling reason.